views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Lift your eyes up, let your wise rise up. See the signs of the times if it's time. Rise up, when death and hell dwell among all God's people. When those we chose and trusted have become completely corrupted and inherently evil. When the feast that feeds you starves our father's children. When snuff, porn, and pedo forms begin to get top billing. Rise up when famine claims millions. When justice gives blind eyes to billions. When the Lord's anger is no longer feared. If his protection is gone and your enemies are near. If you've seen the seas spill over and the mountains shake, break, and fall. If the moon ever turns blood red and you can't see the sun at all. Rise up, no matter if the
Peace and welcome to New Abolitionist Radio on the Black Talk Radio Network, a program that seeks to educate, inform, and agitate on the issue of 21st century legalized slavery. Hosted by social activist and spoken word poet Max Parthas with Black Talk Media Project founder Scotty Reed. On this program, we discuss recent news on legalized 21st century slavery and human trafficking as it is allowed through the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, along with projects and people who help combat it. Today is our March 7th, 2018 broadcast in our 6th season. On and near this day in history, on March 6th of 1857, the United States Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, declared that all blacks, slaves as well as free, were not and could never become citizens of the United States. The court also declared that the 1820 Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional, thus permitting slavery in all of the country's territories. Taney, a staunch supporter of slavery and intent on protecting Southerners from Northern abolitionism, wrote in the court's majority opinion that because Scott was black, he was not a citizen and therefore had no right to sue. The framers of the Constitution, he wrote, believed that blacks had no rights which white men were bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his own benefit. He was bought and sold and treated as an ordinary article of merchandise and traffic, whenever profit could be made by it. Also, Harriet Tubman died on March 10th, 1913, after suffering from pneumonia. After her death, she was buried in Fort Hill Cemetery in Auburn with military honors. During the Fugitive Slave laws, the bounty on Harriet Tubman's head was higher than that of John Wilks Booth, who assassinated President Lincoln. Tonight, we have guests from our comrades at IWOC, the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, which is a project of the industrial workers of the world. Its purpose is to unionize incarcerated individuals. On September 9th, 2016, the IWOC helped organize a U.S. prison strike on the 45th anniversary of the Attica Uprising. The strike involved an estimated 24,000 prisoners in 24 states, the largest prison strike in U.S. history, and what some say is the largest slavery rebellion since the Civil War. So in this week's broadcast, we welcome Diana and Jocelyn. Diana was born and raised in the so-called Mex-U.S. borderlands and is committed to pushing anti-colonial work that moves us toward the abolition of all kinds of walls. She also organizes with IWOC NYC. Jocelyn Cohn, I believe I'm pronouncing it correct. If not, she'll let me know, is an organizer with the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee and a holistic healthcare worker. Now, our abolitionist in profile tonight is Araminta Minty Ross, better known as the one and only Harriet Tubman, born 1820, Dorchester County, Maryland, and joined the ancestors on March 10th, 1913 in Auburn, New York. In the segment, For Freedom's Sake, A History of Rebellion, we remember Gaspar Yanga, the leader of one of the greatest slave rebellions in North America. Our rider of the 21st Century Underground Railroad is Alfred Swinton. On March 1st, 2018, a Connecticut judge dismissed the 1991 murder indictment against him. Swinton is the 30th person to have been wrongfully convicted or indicted based at least in part on bite marks analysis. Yet courts continue to allow the prosecutors to rely on the widely discredited evidence. Swinton, whose 2001 conviction was vacated back in June 2017, wrongfully served 16 years. As usual, we'll dissect and disseminate current news and events related to the 13th Amendment, slavery, from the perspectives of slavery abolitionists. So let's get started. Got a question or comment? You can call in at 704-802-5026. You can chat with us and others by logging in at uberconference.com/Black Talk Radio Network. Once again, I'm Max Parthas. What's happening, Scotty?
Hey, doing the best I can, Max. I don't have any complaints.
Hey, Scotty, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I got to go answer the door. Somebody's on my door. So
yeah, I can hear you. Welcome to New Abolitionist Radio. I also would like to take this opportunity, because it's not one of our segments or a story, but I want to take this opportunity to make an appeal to the abolitionist community out there to take advantage of this March Madness, this NCAA tournament of slaves that will be going on this month. In Charlotte, I know they will have some games.
All right, I'm back.
Yeah.
Scotty?
Yep. Yeah, I'm here, Max.
Can you? He's calling for him too. Scotty Reed?
Okay, I'm sorry. I had myself muted in the conference line, so let me just start over. Those listening on the stream were able to hear me. I apologize for that oversight. But what I was saying was, I like to take this opportunity to appeal to abolitionists in the United States to use this NCAA tournament of slaves. That's their basketball tournament that happens every year in March. CBS just paid about $8 billion for the licensing rights to broadcast that on their network. And I think it is an opportunity for us to engage in a public awareness campaign by going to these games and, excuse me, and going to these games. I plan to, have me a poster board and whatnot, talking about the fact that the NCAA used the 13th Amendment to justify not paying student athletes, basically calling them prison slaves as per the 13th Amendment. This article was published a couple of weeks ago in The Intercept. It has been also reported on other outlets, but it's not really getting the attention that it deserves. So what I plan to do is go to Charlotte, to the Spectrum Center, stand outside on the sidewalk, and greet people as they go to with a sign that says Tournament of Slaves, boycott March Madness. I think this is a great opportunity for us to latch upon the publicity that always surrounds that event and just raise awareness with the individuals out there. I do plan to, of course, record my actions outside. I'm still trying to recruit my daughters to go with me, but if I had to go by myself, I'd go by myself. Ain't no big thing. But if you are in a place where they have NCAA tournament games for this basketball tournament, I just really, really want to implore you to, I don't care if it's just for 30 minutes. I'm not telling you go out there and stand for hours and whatnot. I know some of our people are engaged in that type of activity, but I'm just saying, you could be out there for however long. And if you're able, live stream it to Facebook, live stream it on Periscope through Twitter, live stream it on YouTube. Live stream what you're doing, your public awareness. And I just feel like if we can get some abolitionists at enough of these games, then we'll attract some media attention. At the very least, we'll educate those who pass us by.
May I ask a question about it? So
Sure.
I can figure out how I can help more?
Sure.
The overall goal of the efforts that you're asking for is not to help the students in any way, but to bring attention to what's happening to the prisoners through the 13th Amendment, which they also are using in their
I'm going to say both, Max. I'm going to say both. We know that the UN Declaration of Human Rights makes a distinction, and it says that slavery should be abolished in all its forms. So if the NCAA is acknowledging through this lawsuit, this motion to dismiss this lawsuit by Lawrence Poppy Livers, then I'm going to take them at their word that they practicing slavery. And I'm against all forms of slavery. I know our focus is mainly on 13th Amendment prison slavery, but the NCAA is citing the 13th Amendment as justification for them to practice slavery against the students. So I'm saying I'm doing it for both parties.
All right, one more question. Have you had or heard any opinions from the students themselves on this issue?
No, and I don't expect to, since most of them are under scholarship. And I've heard other people like Jalen Rose, who is a former NCAA basketball player, him, Chris Webber, Baron Davis, Amari Stoudemire. They're former NBA players, but of course they played in college, except for Amari Stoudemire. He went straight to the pros from high school. But they've been speaking out on it. They've been speaking out.
Yeah, I've heard a few.
Yeah.
I've heard a few. One brother, I forget his name, Anthony something or another, was the first person to explain it to me via video that it was modern day slavery from their perspective in the way that they were doing it.
And I didn't know, Bill. I did not know that Bill Russell, who is an NBA legend and college legend, also back in the 60s or early 70s called it slavery and called it a plantation. Said the NCAA is a plantation. But Jalen Rose said that the players should boycott the games and whatnot. I'm not going to put that on them players. That's up to them as individuals and families. I'm not in that position to make a decision for them, okay? And I totally understand it, because look at all the rest of us. And I'm not making excuses for them, but these are children, okay? These are children, and I don't even know if they even know about the story. So, but I don't agree with Jalen Rose that it should all be on the students. This is a society-wide. This involves this entire society, and I think the onus should be on us, the adults, to take the lead.
Okay. And as I said, I've heard other athletes make the same comparisons. I know I've also heard your opinion on a number of occasions where you kind of disputed that idea.
And that was before I became aware.
Exactly, but I remember you saying hard to compare these people with millions and millions of dollars in income to slaves.
No, that's
and I tried very hard to even get that comparison in my head and couldn't do it. The best I could come up with was what they were doing in like New Orleans, where they were breeding and training women to be prostitutes. And they were the highest caliber, of course, and they made the most money, equivalent of millions of dollars, but they were prostitutes.
College students do not get paid. Players do.
I'm talking about the main guys now, like the main players. No
student athlete is getting paid. If they are getting paid, it's under the table, and
or perks.
But none of them are getting paid, and they should be paid. Considering the billions of dollars that they bringing in annually, they should be paid. They should be, like Livers argues in this lawsuit, at least considered paid as work-study students, given how much time they spend in that gym, in that film room, and on that field or that court. So I have in the past resisted comparisons of athletes to slaves, okay? Because they have multi-million dollar contracts and they can walk away from them at any time, all right? And they don't consider themselves to be slaves. But student athletes is a whole nother ball game. This is exploitation of human labor, and it is labor.
And the shame of it all is that they're actually quoting the 13th Amendment as their reasoning to be able to do this.
This isn't the first lawsuit. They have responded with the 13th Amendment, and I thank Sean King for bringing that to my attention by putting that in his article. This isn't the first time that they have used the 13th Amendment to defend themselves against lawsuits by student athletes or former student athletes.
Yeah, well, I'm with you, Scotty. Whatever you needed me to do, just let me know. I've already been sharing the information throughout my networks, and whatever else you need me to do, just holler and let me know. I don't, I'm in this situation where I don't always need to understand everything that's going on to support the people that's supposed to be supported. You know what I mean? Scotty put in the work to understand what's happening, and that means that's enough for me right there. I'll learn as I go along.
I appreciate that, Max.
All right. Well, we have a couple guests coming in from IWOC. IWOC is a comrade of ours as an organization. We've helped them not only with the prison labor work strike 2016, but also a number of other projects that they have been working on over the years. And we've kind of known some of their members pretty damn well. And they are also an abolitionist organization, which is, I'm proud to say, that they are. And their goal is to organize prisoners who are getting nothing. Like the term or the phrase slave labor comes from having people work for nothing as slaves. And that's exactly what's happening within the prisons. But they're fighting back, and they've achieved some incredible successes over the years, as well as some international notoriety.
Oh, most certainly we reported on New Abolitionists. They also, were among the groups that helped publicize and stood outside of prisons and stuff and had demonstrations on that national prison strike that occurred last year. So I am an admirer of their work.
Yes. And, when you hear the phrase like good white people, this is a group that has them. Like there are some good white people there for sure. And I'm just saying that in a humorous sense. You know what I mean?
Tongue in cheek. I understand.
Yeah, tongue in cheek. But definitely there's some good people in there who know what it means to be to suffer. I mean, I know some of the members personally, and they went through some serious hardcore stuff. So their opinions and perspectives come from firsthand often of what they're dealing with. So are they on already? Should we bring them in now?
No, we're still waiting on them to call. I asked them to call in at 20 after, so we still got 3 minutes to 20 after.
Okay. Well, I was mentioning earlier in the intro that today or yesterday was the anniversary of the Dred Scott decision. And, over the years, Scotty, you and I both have been hearing, and I think you did some research on this, as to whether or not that this Supreme Court ruling was overturned in any way. Do you have any information on that? I found a little bit of it.
Well, it's like this. All right. That what you was reading during the intro, that is just commentary from one judge, one disgusting individual who I hope is burning in hell right now. I mean, truly, truly disgusting for him to say that. And he was incorrect, okay? Because, your wife's ancestor, Paul Coffey, was a citizen who paid taxes. I mean, only citizens pay taxes, right? So how were free black people being taxed if they weren't citizens? Okay? So, just because these people have on these robes or they went to law school or they sit on the bench does not mean they're correct in anything that they say or they do. Okay? Do their interpretations of the law carry weight? Of course it carries weight. But obviously, and this is something you hear from the conscious community, I shouldn't say all the time, but I have heard from the conscious community. Oh, the white man, the black man has no rights that the white man is bound to respect. Citing Dred Scott. Okay, that was back then. This is a different era. That was before the Civil War even. That was before the 14th Amendment and all these other amendments, all right? So we have to look at it on the timeline and where it fits in the timeline, okay? Now, we know that there are federal laws that our ancestors, Dr. King and many, many others, fought for human rights, codified in federal law as civil rights for black people. So if you have federal laws on the books that say that it's illegal It's outlawed. Discrimination is outlawed. Doesn't mean that people are going to stop practicing racism and breaking the law. It happens all the time. They break the law. Okay. But in terms of, we're going to talk legalese, if we're going to talk about what the law says today, then we have to recognize that there are federal laws on the books that outlaw that. Okay. And so you can go around and claiming that white men don't have to respect your rights. I'm going to tell the white man to his face, you better respect me or else.
I have done a little bit of research, Scotty, on the issue. And there's one thing that I have that is unique is the ability to look at the actual newspaper reports from that day via the Black Chronicle. You know, I have this big book I showed you with all these different headline newspapers of that day from the Black Chronicle. So I actually have that day in front of me. And the number one thing that they talked about was all Negroes are denied citizenship based on that brief. And like you said, people have been saying that wasn't never overturned. So we're still considered less than human. So I tried to find out what people are saying in regards to it being overturned. And pretty much the best I can find and was agreed by all of the different sources that I was looking through was this right here. And it's very short. This comes from a certified educator by the name of Brett D. out of Los Angeles. And he says, no Supreme Court case following the 1857 Dred Scott ruling directly overturned the decision of Justice Roger B. Taney's court. However, the 14th Amendment following the Civil War gave equal citizenship to freed slaves following abolition and promised them equal protection under the law. This, the 14th Amendment, directly overturned that part of the ruling which argued that the federal courts had no jurisdiction in the case because Dred Scott was not a citizen of the U.S., but merely the citizen of a state. The 14th redefined citizenship, thus overruling any state laws on citizenship requirements. Some historians have argued that the slaughterhouse cases reinterpreted the Dred Scott case by reiterating that the 14th Amendment was designed specifically to overturn the 1857 ruling. But this was simply emphasizing the earlier amendment's meaning and importance. So that's about the best I can find right there. Well, that's where everybody's pointing to the 14th Amendment saying that did it, right?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Did I not mention the 14th Amendment?
No, I'm in agreement with you. I was just reading.
Yeah. What and Max, another thing you brought up, another misconception, and I blame this on reading comprehension and people actually not doing any research, but just repeating stuff they heard other people say. But the Constitution, I forget the name of the compromise. It was called, I think it was a compromise. I can't remember the name of the compromise. But
Missouri?
No, it wasn't Missouri Compromise. The Constitution never said that black people were only 3/5 human. I mean, come on. These slavers denied the humanity of black people, period. So they wasn't going to even recognize them as 3/5 human. That didn't have nothing to do with it. What it had to do with was the census. Okay? People know what the census is? The census is when they count the population of the United States, and then they apportion the number of representatives that state will have to Congress as well as the number of senators. The slave states wanted their victims of slavery to be fully counted. They didn't want they victims to be counted as only 3/5. They wanted them to be counted as a whole person, because that would give the southern states an advantage, because that's where the enslaved population was concentrated, was in the South. So if you count all of the victims of slavery, then that's going to give the South an unfair advantage in the number of people they have in Congress. And the free states, so-called free states and northern states, still practicing racism, but the northern states, hey, no, them people first, y'all trying to have it both ways. They ain't citizens. They not even citizens. So how you going to count them? They not, these elected representatives are not going to be representing the enslaved. So why are you even counting them? So what they came up with and I remember now, it's called the 3/5 compromise, where only 3/5, not of an individual, will be counted. 3/5 of the entire victim of slavery population in a state. 3 out of 5. They would only count that was the compromise. So it's a lot of misinformation out there, man. I blame it on reading comprehension, people not looking up stuff for themselves, and then just repeating what they heard from somebody else, assuming that person knows what they're talking about and actually did the research.
Yeah, doing the research, there's a lot to be said for that. You know what I mean? When you just research it for yourself instead of just parroting what people say. So yeah, man, indeed. Well, recently there's been a lot of comparisons to the fugitive slave laws with the immigration crisis that we're dealing with. And as you know, last year I was invited by Our Revolution to come and do a workshop on the direct connection of modern day slavery and the immigration system and how it was working. So, man, I went through like weeks of research and found all kinds of amazing things, which I'll put on New Abolitionist Radio. But I've got an article now that just came out recently that talks about that in particular. I haven't actually read the article, so I've only I meant to read it, but I've been so busy today getting everything together, I haven't actually read it. So me reading it tonight will be the first time we can hear it together. All right.
Yeah, please, Max. And while you're doing that, I'm actually calling our guests. Maybe there was some mix up and they thought I was going to call them, so I'll go ahead and call them while you go into that.
Great. Well, this comes from the LA Times, and it's March 1st, 2018. The title says, "There are echoes of the fugitive slave law in today's immigration debate." Last week, Libby Schaaf, mayor of Oakland, took the logic of so-called sanctuary cities and states one step further by warning the Immigration and Customs Enforcement had planned a raid on immigrants in the country illegally. Over the weekend, roughly 150 immigrants were apprehended in Northern California. Predictably, the backlash from Trump supporters, immigrant haters, and ICE authorities has been intense. Was Schaaf impeding law enforcement? What was she thinking? It was probably a good deal like what the leaders of the pre-Civil War northern cities and states were thinking when they resisted the federal government's efforts to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act, which a Southern-dominated Congress had enacted in 1850. In case you don't remember your U.S. history, an 1842 court ruling absolved states of any duty to cooperate in the recapture of former slaves who freed themselves by fleeing to the north.
Hey, Max, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
yes,
but I do believe we have our guests on the line and their time is limited. So I just want to check. Do we have our guest on the line? I see someone, unknown caller has unmuted themselves. We're looking for Deanna and Jocelyn to call in. If you are on the line, hit star to unmute yourself. But do we have either of you on the line?
Hi, this is Jocelyn. I'm here. Thanks so much for having us.
Hey, Jocelyn. Welcome to New Abolitionist Radio for you and Diana.
Yeah, we're still waiting on Diana to call, but we'll go ahead and get started. Something could have happened. We hope that she's safe and sound behind these enemy lines. But let me just briefly.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hi, Diana. Thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, so
thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So this is what they will be sharing with us tonight. There's a lot of activity that has been going on concerning political prisoners, as well as Mumia. We got a couple of fundraisers that are happening. Also, some other information they would like to share, and information on Dr. Stewart, who is a current victim of modern day slavery and human trafficking through the prison system. So, ladies, I want to turn it over to you, whoever would like to start.
Deanna, do you want to maybe start by talking about our Welcome Home fundraiser?
Sure. So as many of you might know already, that IWOC is really committed to pushing inside organizing and like really looking at inside folks to lead and support organizing work that happens that often doesn't get, any support. Like we are planning to host a welcome home and fundraiser for our activity. So this welcome home will be scheduled in April, and really to greet and integrate and provide after-release support for some of our comrades, some who have been part of IWOC for a while, and some who have been part of IWOC after the Bronx 120 raid. So we're really looking forward to having people support and come through to be able to show these folks that we need to build continuing resistance on the outside, especially those folks who know what it's like to be part of that captivity by the state, to know that effort, there's people on the outside that we need to continue that still when they come out. And how do we support the people who are still behind captivity? So we're hoping this to happen in mid to late April, so next month.
And will it be online based? And what's some of the details going on with this fundraiser?
Well, it will be in the Bronx. So we're hoping to host it in the Bronx physically, an event, and we will have that information up online on our Facebook and our Instagram. We don't have the date yet, but that is to come, and we'll be having some of our comrades and folks who have been released joining us. So we want to make sure we show them that, that we are here to build this family of resistance post-released, and that we need to continue to support folks on the inside. And, and get, we're not a nonprofit, so, this comes out of like volunteer efforts and out of really like spare money that we all individual put together to be able to support the work that we need to get done, postage, printing, all those things. So it'll be in the Bronx, hopefully.
All right, just keep us abreast, and when it comes closer to that date, we hope to have you back so that we can remind people and give them those details. So what's going on with the Mumia watercolor auction I'm hearing about?
Yeah, so last fall, Mumia AbuJamal, who I'm sure many, if not all of your listeners know, is a real warrior on the inside, has been for decades now, and is himself the victim of really extreme repression. And in the face of it, he just published a book that hopefully many people have read or are reading, Black Lives That Mattered. So it was a real honor when he said that he wanted to contribute a painting that he made about modern-day prison slavery, specifically as a fundraiser for people who have been affected by these so-called gang raids. So IWOC works with many people who have been incarcerated under these gang raids, which are really a way for modern-day slave catchers to go out into black communities and take young people away, charge them with offenses that they haven't even committed, and then force them to plea down to something that they also didn't commit just to get rid of them from the community. Exactly. And it causes, obviously, even a year in federal prison causes an enormous amount of stress and poverty for people's families. And we've been supporting folks while they're inside and also their families. And again, Mumia contributed a really amazing watercolor. It's the largest watercolor he's ever made. It's 8.5 by 11. and it depicts people enslaved in chattel slavery, and it's 2 panels, and that panel says then, and the other side of the panel is people walking next to a prison facility, also in chains, and it says now. So he's really visually making the proclamation that prison is a modern-day manifestation of slavery. And we right now have an online auction, and that auction website is 32auctions.com/here-now. And if you go to 32auctions.com and search for Mumia AbuJamal, you will also find the painting there. Or even if you Google auction Mumia AbuJamal, you should be able to find it. Or if you go to our Facebook or Instagram. And we're hoping to raise a significant amount of money, since this is really a one-of-a-kind painting. And it was such an incredibly generous contribution from Mumia. I know that he's also done some short radio interviews for his podcast about the gang rape issue, and it's something very close to his heart. And anyone who owns this painting would be, oh my God, like the luckiest person in the world, and also be really, really directly helping out families. There's no, as Deanna said, we're not a nonprofit. There's no overhead. There's no middle people. The money will go directly to directly affected families.
You know, I was thinking the same thing. You know, Mumia's world famous revolutionary, a living legend. So I imagine there are a lot of people out there listening right now that wouldn't mind having that, you know, in their home to display. I certainly wouldn't mind having it.
Feeling really generous, Scotty? If anybody's feeling really generous, get it for New Abolitionist Radio. I'm sure Scotty would love to have that there at the headquarters. I'm just saying.
Just saying, yeah.
I remember when we spoke about the issue with what was going on with the Bronx. I believe it was with IWOC back when they started doing it initially, when it first began, and we went into the details then of what was going on, and hearing and then now getting a chance to possibly view Mumia once again setting the standard and saying, look, this is what we were dealing with then, and this is what we're dealing with now, and there is no difference except time, is a perspective that I have been really struggling to impress upon many others within our movements. You know, we got different things we're doing, but we have to all get on that same page. He's telling us this is slavery. There's no question anymore. Now we have to fight slavery, and that has been a difficult task in getting everybody on that same page. We've been doing different things for so long, it's hard not to go back to what we're used to, but the new idea is an old idea, and it's the best way to fight it. From everything I've seen, the results have been amazing, especially with RICO charges for slavery and human trafficking and all the things that go with that. Right, Scotty?
Yes, I would like to see more of these so-called legal organizations wink at what is it? I'm about to say the NCAA. Man, they just occupying my mind right now, you know, with their tournament of slaves coming up and citing the 13th Amendment as justification not to pay the student athlete. But I agree, Max. I agree.
Yeah, we have got to get on the same page. And Mumia, in this painting and in his words, when he called in to the March on Washington, all continue to say the same thing, that we're fighting this beast, and it's called slavery. It's not called mass incarceration. It's not called overcriminalization. It's not called exploitation. It's not called debtors' prisons. It's freaking slavery, pure and simple.
Yeah, 13th Amendment says it.
Set of clothes. That's all. Right. So continue with your thing. I just want to say that I appreciate that. I appreciate Mumia for his messaging and for bringing light to these issues in the way only he can.
Right. No, that's really beautiful, and a really beautiful encapsulation of what IWOC is trying to do. I know what you all are trying to do and are doing right now on New Abolitionist Radio. And I just wanted to emphasize that, as Deanna said, we're having a welcome home. And one of the people that the welcome home party is for is someone who was caught up in these gang raids. And we're just going to be seeing more and more people coming back from these. And one of the things I was talking about with one of the mothers of someone who's currently incarcerated on these raids the other day was that we're now seeing that people were arrested on these RICO charges, like, you know, for murder and major drug dealing, and then they're getting sentenced to, you know, 2 years time served on marijuana distribution charges. So that really tells you what BS these RICO charges are when you see that, you know, 90% of the people pleading are pleading out to minor drug offenses that, I mean, let's be real, they're only pleading to them because it's the lowest offense they can plead to. It's not even that they're pleading to them because they're actual charges. So I think as these go on, it's really important to shed light on that so that people who will continue to get arrested on these charges as we continue to fight the police as they're doing these raids, that they know, okay, the state doesn't have very much on us. They might try to intimidate us, but really when we act together and we rely on each other, we know that, you know, we can't be flipped. I mean, that's how a lot of these charges also happen is, you know, people are really terrorized by the state, and unfortunately that causes some people to flip. And that's how a lot of the prosecutors are able to put pressure on people to take pleas in the first place. Yeah, so it's really a community effort to stop these raids from happening.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point.
I'm sorry, Scotty, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Max. I think that's very important, although it's hard for me to sit in judgment of an individual who might be facing 20, 30 years on some trumped up charges. But as Max likes to point out, you know, more than I do, he points out quite often the high rate of plea deals in this country, and that, hey, if we only would stop taking these plea deals, we could clog the system up so much that, hell, it might be 10 years before you come to trial or whatnot. But then also, you know, and I understand the mistrust of that jury box, considering, you know, how widespread racism and white supremacy is in the criminal justice system, in the populace, and these people so willing to convict people without any evidence whatsoever. So it's hard for me to sit in judgment of somebody for taking a plea deal, because I'm not the one looking at doing all those years in prison slavery. But just, you know, on the wider conversation, it has to be some sort of change in the mindset that, you know, we're just not pleading out, you know. And it also, you know, in addition to that, we have to do jury nullification education, in my opinion, as well. But please continue.
Yeah. Right. No, I just want to say absolutely, and I think that in order for people to not feel pressured to take plea deals, it's also our responsibility as community members to provide them with the support for that.
And I think that is one of the things that we intend to do with this Welcome Home, to make sure that, you know, that folks who have been released and have been through this experience can speak on that, like after release, to folks in the same community, because it really doesn't say, it's a different way of telling folks in the community about what is really happening. You know, someone who has been through that experience holds different weight, and we want to make sure that, that there's awareness about, the system, like you mentioned, doesn't have capacity to. It's convenient for them to make sure corner people into pleas. It doesn't really have the capacity to really take everyone to trial. So what does that collective effort look like? And I think it can be informed by those folks who come out, for sure.
I agree.
There's so much to unpack with all of that. But first, I do want to say thank you for the welcome back party that you're putting on. It's so important, just as an individual, to know somebody gave a damn, that you went through all of this. And that's beautiful. And to give them a chance to speak while it's fresh in their mind about what they think and how they feel. Hopefully you record it all, and we'll have some access to it. Maybe be able to play some of it here on New Abolitionist Radio when it occurs.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I look forward to it. I was saying earlier that The Intercept says that their headlines was that New York gang sweeps are where prosecutors are using conspiracy laws to score easy convictions. And I guess we all agree on that statement, but there's so much to unpack in the statement itself. Why would prosecutors want to get rid of these young Black and Hispanic men? That's something to unpack alone. Secondly, New York State charges the most money to incarcerate teenagers than any other state in the union, as much as $350,000 a year. So there's a profit mode that's involved in this here, as well as we have reported here on New Abolitionist Radio that in New York, in the Bronx as well, they have these places that are called $1 million blocks. And the $1 million blocks are named that because the incarcerations are so frequent, the fines and the fees and the warrants are so frequent in there that they generate $1 million a year, regardless of how decrepit the properties might be or how bad everything is. The money is still flowing.
Yes. Yes. I would also want to point out before we hit our last two subjects with our special guest tonight from IWOC is that from the interviews that I have done concerning Bronx 120 and the people I've read their commentary on it, it seems to be a consensus that these raids were retaliation for the federal court's ruling. And of course, that was initiated by lawsuits by the people, but ruling that stop and frisk was unconstitutional. And so what do you ladies think about that? You think that that was retaliation for stop and frisk being declared unconstitutional?
I guess from my end. Oh, go ahead, Deanna. Sorry.
I mean, I think this. If we go back to to slavery and its inception, this system has been nonstop, creating different circumstances and different ways of transform and reform, and that's really in itself the definition of fascism, right? So it's been able to transform and make itself to continue to maintain order in the way that it deems necessary to survive, right? So I think it might have some of that, but also I think there's other factors around the other attacks that are happening in our community, such as gentrification and really profiting off the land that these families really call their homes. I think that's part of it as well.
That really hadn't stuck in my head till you said it, the gentrification part. When you destroy a community and the people in it on purpose, so you can get the land cheap and then sell it high.
Right.
Okay, now we also have a couple of other topics, two more topics to cover with you ladies. And again, thank you for taking the time out to share this information with our audience. But can you talk to us about the Inside newsletter? And then we'll also talk about Dr. Stewart, what's going on with him.
Yes. So Kite is our newsletter that it really contains content from our members at IWOC, friends, family, really both from behind the enemy lines, inside, and also those folks who are living outside in the open air prison and their experiences. So this newsletter, because it is an inside-outside collaboration, its frequency is a little bit, it's more lengthy, but along with what we've been talking about and being able to make that connection about slavery being really the root, and now that direct manifestation of what we're seeing today comes out of the root and the pillars of the inception of this country. The topic that we're covering in this newsletter is really prison slavery. So it includes updates around Operation Push that's happening, a timeline really around prison resistance and what that has entailed, and zooming into like the more recent manifestations of resistance inside prison that we've seen in the last really 2-3 years, and some of the content that we've been seeing here in New York State around like the Department of Corrections continuous attacks on the prison population, around the package policies, the Directive 4911A that seeks to privatize and limit access to goods inside for folks on the inside, and they continue to make money out of folks, like finding new ways to make money out of folks inside who are already being exploited and enslaved. And that package policy, we also have a powerful testimony from Jalil Muntakim, who's going to be sharing some of that, and we're going to be publishing that as part of the newsletter, and from some folks from the women's prison in Bedford, and it really includes also information that folks on the inside can keep updated to what is going on in other places, because we know that there's a lot of censorship in there, so this serves as not only as a way to keep them updated, but also as a way to maintain communication. And it also includes some legal section that might help individuals do like that self-advocacy, because we're not a legal group. We don't do legal, necessarily individualized legal like case loads or anything like that, but we do include information that might support people doing their own individual legal advocacy, so we're in the midst of working through that. We have called in submissions from the inside, and there's been a good response from folks on the inside that are wanting to have their words shared throughout the prison population, but also like folks on the outside. So we're hoping to have that also available at the Welcome Home and fundraiser event.
You said a couple of things that touched me. It always does when I even think of the scope of how it's done, where you said that all of these industries on inside are vying to get a piece of that person. And they do, from the commissaries to the JPay credit cards to the bank accounts to the slippers they wear, the clothes they wear, you name it, it's all there. And, you could be like a 16-year-old boy without enough money to buy a sandwich. You could be a homeless person on the street that don't even have a house, let alone bank account. They'll pick you up, put you in that cage, and you're suddenly worth $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 just for being there. And then while you're in there, earning them this money from the taxpayer, they're robbing your whole family. They're like, the fine is $1,000. Well, who's going to get it? Well, tell your mama to go out on the corner and get it. That's how they look at it. Like, you're going to get it one way or another. And we do. We rob, we steal, we borrow, we beg until we can pay the fines, pay the bills, get the bail money, and on and on and on. And it just rapes us of all wealth and all power.
Yeah, it's a well-oiled machine that is, this is why, going back to like what is this about? Why do they want to remove people? It is about maintaining this oppressive system, and they get fucking creative. I'm sorry.
You're right.
They get really creative. They get really creative, and we need to be in the up and up, and we gotta find our own means to maintain people informed, and it's an uphill battle, and we know that they're finding ways to make money out of us in the inside and on the outside, so we need to be sharp and be able to see it as it is and communicate. And there's always been ongoing organizing inside prison, it's not as visible as other organizing that happens on the outside. And really that's our role as IWOC, is to support that work that exists, that often doesn't get supported because of that, removal from people of community, that disconnect sometimes, We know that they send them to remote areas for a reason. And it's just like a sub-world, too. Like, it has its own, its own economy and its own, fuel. But it's not removed from our communities, because we all have people who are there,
Yesterday was, as we mentioned in the program, the anniversary of the Dred Scott decision. And at the time, in 1857, of the Dred Scott decision, slavery had been an integral part of every part of American society. Everything was involved in slavery one way or another. Well, that's where we find ourselves right now. And that's why it makes it so hard to see, because we're like the six blind men and the elephant, and everybody's grabbing apart going, I know what this is. And you can't see the whole thing. The whole thing is integrated into every part of American society. That's why when you go to places that exist in poverty, you'll find bail bondsmen who are making plenty of money. You'll find rent-to-owns that are making plenty of money, hair care places that are making plenty. You find all of these places, like liquor stores, that prey upon that misery, just getting wealthy.
Right.
Well, see, this is the one day a week when we all get our hearts on our sleeves. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a passionate issue, and the clearer you see it, the more upset about it you get, I guess.
Hey, Max, if somebody doesn't feel some kind of way or get upset about slavery, then I say something wrong with them. How can you not? How can you know that slavery exists and it's affecting millions upon millions of people and not be upset about it? I don't understand that. You have to be an unfeeling person with no emotions whatsoever, and this issue has been with me for 6 years, ever since I read the 13th Amendment. This is what I mainly focus on, because to me, this is the number one issue of our time. Just like it was the number one issue of Frederick Douglass' time and those who came before him and Gabriel Prosser. It's still the number one issue, especially concerning non-white folks in this society.
Well, everything we spoke about tonight in our conversation with Diana and Jocelyn.
We still have one more, Max.
Well, I'm just saying all the things we talked about so far are available on New Abolitionist Radio, including the gang sweeps where the prosecutors are using conspiracy laws, what the teenagers are going through, the racketeering, Mumia's new book, as well as his appeal to freedom. So the only thing I don't have up there is the website for the water painting. I was looking for it and couldn't find it. Could you give me the address for that again?
Absolutely. It's 3232 auctions, AUCTIONS.com/here, HERE now, NOW.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
If you would, we're going to hold off on our break, Max, and until after, we have finished our segment with the ladies from IWOC. If you would talk to us about this brother that's locked up, this doctor that's locked up. I just had it in front of me and I don't see his name. So if y'all would remind me.
Sure. His name is Dr. Alphonsus Stewart, and he is incarcerated currently at Clinton Correctional Facility, which I'm sure most of your listeners know is rather infamous, both for its extreme repression and also because two brothers were, at least momentarily, able to escape from that prison. And since then, it has become really one of the most restrictive. I mean, it's even hard to say this because every prison is a prison slave system that's extremely repressive in that way, but it's somehow more repressive than others. But he actually was the victim. He's a very outspoken advocate. He's an advocate for himself and for others. He's been an inside prison lawyer. He's done political advocacy for himself and others. He's become extremely highly educated. And as we all know, that's very, very threatening for the system to have someone inside who is very educated and aware of their rights and aware of the rights of others. So he's faced an extreme amount of harassment by corrections officers while inside, but has never lost hope, including last year in September of 2017, a corrections officer at the facility that he was incarcerated in at the time, Sullivan Correctional Facility, gave him pastry that had glass in it. And Dr. Stewart actually, we with Dr. Stewart's words and his message, we were collaboratively able to raise money to have that pastry, and with the help of his attorney, have that pastry tested and confirm that there was, in fact, glass in the pastry that he was given by the corrections officer.
Wow.
So and when you hear things like that, we know about it, this one case, because we happen through, random sending letters 2.5 years ago, been able to make contact with Dr. Stewart. And because he's also an extremely outspoken, confident, and well-educated man, despite the extreme repression and harassment that he's faced. So to me, it really makes me feel like if this is happening to him and we know about it, how many other people is this happening to on a regular basis, and we don't know about it, and they might not have any recourse at all for this extreme form of torture that they're facing. So right now we have, sorry for all the fundraising, we have another fundraiser up for him now because he's seeking to file paperwork necessary to hold the individual corrections officers who fed him this this glass-filled pastry accountable. So it's a very modest amount. We're only asking for $400, just enough to cover the legal fees. We were able to raise that before to cover the test fees for the pastry. So we're really hoping that we'll be able to get this amount for Dr. Stewart as soon as possible so we can help him file this paperwork. Because, as you said, when you're in prison, you're really a source of income for the state. You don't make any money. You are only being bled of your money.
Right. I have a question. So y'all were able to prove that it was glass in this pastry. Was there any type of action taken against the guards? I wouldn't be surprised if there were not any actions taken, but it seems you had concrete evidence. What happened with that?
So as far as we know, there is nothing happening to the individual corrections officers right now. He does have a case against them that's pending. So his current case you can find online. There's a link to it within the fundraiser page. But basically, he has a civil lawsuit against the officers as the COs, as well as the guidance counselors and other sergeants and lieutenants within the prison at that time. But on its own, the correction system is just like the police department. They don't, on their own, take any action against people who have committed really unbelievable atrocities against people. So the short answer is nothing is happening right now to the COs as far as we know, and we're working right now to support Dr. Stewart in having some kind of action taken against those corrections officers and hopefully against the system more generally.
When I hear about people on the inside who it will be very easy for them to just do their time, keep their head down, keep their mouth shut, but it really says something about an individual who goes on the inside and not only attempts to help themselves, but to help others and to advocate against this evil, wicked system. Because, I'm looking at people on the outside who are not under, those extreme oppressive conditions. Of course, we are being oppressed behind these enemy lines, but not to the extent that, these brothers and sisters behind the bars are. And when I see people out here who just, they have the knowledge, but they don't want to act on it, and I don't like to engage in name calling, but, I got to call them cowards when I hear about people like this doctor who could just very easily keep his head down, keep his mouth shut, not say nothing, but he's doing the exact opposite and doing righteous work on the inside. So thank you for sharing that story with him. Is there anything that you ladies would like to share with us in closing and give out all the websites, addresses that you would like to give out for people to connect?
I think that's it for now. We'll keep you all updated on the Welcome Back / fundraiser event next month.
All right.
Yeah, and just in terms of websites, if people do want to donate, we don't have a fundraising page just for IWOC up right now, but we do have a PayPal, and that's just our email address, iwoc.nyc@riseup, riseup.net. And if anyone feels moved to support the work, they can donate directly through our PayPal, just send money through the PayPal. And the fundraiser for Dr. Stewart is quite a long link, so I won't share the whole link, but it's a You Caring fundraiser. And if you go to You Caring and search for Al-Fatah, AL-FATAH, Stewart, STEWART, you'll find the fundraiser that we currently have for him and can donate there. And again, the auction is 32auctions.com/herenow. And I would definitely support someone purchasing that painting for you all to have in your office. I think that would be a beautiful contribution.
Yes, it would.
I think so too. I think it would be awesome. Yeah. I think somebody should do that. And I guess I'm not really kidding either. If you got it like that, go ahead and pick it up for us so we can have that in our.
We know someone out there does, so we're waiting. Yeah. We know a lot of people out there does. So.
And I'm looking at the picture right now. It's a pretty awesome picture, and he's clear about what he's saying. Like, this is then and this is now. So yeah, we all need to get on that same page. That was then. This is now. The only thing difference is has been it's advanced with technology, just like everything else.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to say thank you guys for coming and sharing this with us today. And if there's anything that we could do to help you that we haven't done today, just let us know. And if you have any more news, just contact Scotty and you can come right back on, no problem at all.
Yeah, or Tag. Tag helps us out. That's our representative in the NYC area. Shout out to Tag. But thank you again, Diana and Jocelyn, and you both stay safe behind these enemy lines.
And don't forget us when you get the videos, man, because we do want to share that.
We will. We should be streaming it.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know what time you'll be doing the party, but if it coincides with the new Abolitionist Radio Day, maybe we can do it live like we did once before with the Millions of Prisoners March. Scotty? I don't know, something to consider.
Yeah, something to consider. So, yeah.
Thank you both so much for all the work you do and for having us on.
No doubt.
Thank
Peace
you.
and God bless. We're going to take our break now, I guess, Scotty?
Yes, sir.
All right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll share what stories we can and then get into our regular scheduled segments of the evening. You're listening to New Abolitionist Radio right here on the Black Talk Radio Network.com. We'll be right back after this.
Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com.
Peace and welcome back to New Abolitionist Radio here with Scotty Reed and Max Parthas. So, Scotty, what else did you want to cover today before I start grabbing anything out of that huge list that we have?
Does your list include the story of the whistleblower in Texas who has come forth and is telling how those guards were abusing these juveniles, these children, in these correction facilities or detention facilities, whatever they call them down there? Her name is, I'm pulling it up now because there's
Mitchell.
Dominique Mitchell. Thank you. Did you choose that as one of the stories? Because I think that, when we talk about, people who could easily just keep their mouths shut, as she was told, just keep your mouth shut. Don't say nothing about it. Ain't nothing going to happen to these officers. Why you making all this noise? Why you trying to make trouble for the system? You supposed to be loyal to the system. Literally, that's what they told. That's what they told her. But Max, if that's one of the stories, I can go ahead and play that short video of her speaking on it.
Yeah, I was hoping to be able to hear or to share that video tonight because I know you did something on it earlier. But here you go. Okay,
I'm pulling it up now. It is posted on blacktalkradionetwork.com. It's in the video section. It is titled, for those that want to share it, please share it. It's Prison Whistleblower Dominique Mitchell Describes Systemic Abuse of Children in Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Here it is. Let me unmute it.
I hope this does help change. I'm so passionate about working with the kids, and I truly believe I'm doing the right thing. I worked at the Courage Youthful Offender Program that housed kids aged 14 to 17 years of age. I worked for 4 years at the Courage program as a program supervisor, and in my first year, there was incidents that were reported to me of kids being physically abused by officers, in which I reported as soon as I found out. I was often told that that's not what we do. You got to be loyal to the Courage program. Officers would not be held accountable for doing that. And I told them from 2013 that I would not stop reporting any type of abuse or anything. It had to be investigated. I asked for the officers to show me the videos of the excessive use of force because too many kids were coming with bruises on them. There was incidents of abuse in the sense of neglect, not providing food. They weren't required to have 3 meals per day. They weren't getting that. On a monthly basis, I was sending emails, I need help. I was concerned about my own safety because I was getting threatened by officers in there that were telling me to mind my business, that this is security, it's about security. They told me if the kids shouldn't have brought their self in there if they didn't want to be subjected to this. So there was 4 years that I worked there. I reported abuse numerous times, and never was it reported to the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, even though I requested the assistant director, the former program director. I asked the wardens to address it, to investigate it. No one ever did. Again, the culture of TDCJ is retaliation. You report something, more than likely you will lose your job, you'll be demoted. I was told oftentimes to keep my mouth quiet. This is security. It has nothing to do with you.
Disgusting, Max. Disgusting.
Absolutely, man. But, I have to applaud her bravery.
Yes.
She stood alone. It's like literally stood alone against this long-time, hardened system that has been, that's just the way things are for probably 150 freaking years. And people just come into it and get indoctrinated into it. And then they blame the children that they're holding in these facilities and they abuse them. In that interview, at one point, it was talking about how the guards had said the kids should have never did nothing to be there to begin with. And I'm like, we sit here every day talking about how these kids are being railroaded into these prisons. We just got off with guests who was talking about how they're using RICO charges to do it. And these guards actually believe that everybody that walks in their door is guilty, and they treat them.
Oh, Max,
like
they don't believe that, Max. That's what they tell you. That's the excuse that they use. That's what they maybe tell themselves or what have you. But hey, even if the child did do something, that needs some correction, and I certainly don't think a prison is the place to offer that correction. But even if they did, that's no excuse for you be a child abuser, you piece of scum.
She said she was there 4 years seeing this happening over and over and over again, and still to this day, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has done nothing about it.
See, that's what I was talking about. Cowards.
Over again.
Cowards, man, cowards. Okay, cowards. How many times? I bet you it's a bunch of men and women in there who see the same things that they see. And that's why I have to agree, man. Just like we say there are no good slave catchers, there are no good prison overseers. Because if you're seeing this type of stuff and you're not standing up and speaking out on behalf of these children who are being abused, then guess what? You just as guilty as the person who's abusing them.
If the product is slavery and genocide, and all you do is make nuts and bolts in some hidden room somewhere, you're still participating in genocide and slavery, just making those nuts and bolts. So yeah, there's no aspect of this where your career can be described as something good for the society. If it was up to me, I would suggest that all people of color, because you would be the ones who would do it, and those who are willing to stand with them, to just step down from your job and say, I'll no longer do this. It's slavery and human trafficking, and my life and my soul is not worth this damn paycheck.
You know, Max, that reminds me. Last week, didn't you report a story where the state of North Carolina was having trouble finding plantation overseers because nobody wants the job?
They were talking about bringing in the National Guard to now patrol prisons, which, I mean, technically, those are the prisoners' homes now, because some of them are in there for life. So that's the only home they have. So now you're about to sequester these soldiers in their homes.
It's crazy, man, that all of this is going on, and we should have a mass movement, man. We should have had, just like all those women turned out, and I'm not hating on them or anything like that, but all these people, we've seen millions of people turn out in the streets for these women's march and what have you. And some of them had the audacity to put a pink hat on Harriet Tubman's statue in Washington, D.C. But when we call for people to stand up against modern day slavery and human trafficking, it's just the dedicated few that turn out.
Salute to Dominique Mitchell. Keep your
Salute,
head,
definitely, abolitionist.
Head down and watch your back. Just publish a book. The more notoriety you have, the better. So yeah, get the word out there. And if you want to come on air and you hear this somehow, just contact us. So maybe we'll reach out to you. You can come on and tell a story from here at New Abolitionist Radio.
Most certainly. But that's all, Max. Scotty. That's the only story that has really, that I felt I wanted to share most tonight.
Well, there was as usual, Scotty, there's more than we could ever tell in our limited amount of time. But I do keep all the stories in order to document the times as they go along. Like Nina Simone said, it's an artist's responsibility to document their times. So I'm doing that.
Well, Max, before you go, I'm sorry, before you go into the next article, sorry to interrupt you. It does appear we have a caller from the 816 area code. Thank you for calling in to New Abolitionist Radio. You're on with Scotty and Max. What's your name and what's your question or comment?
All right, this is Jeff Humfeld. I'm with Jaws of Justice Radio in Kansas City. Howdy. We have a situation here that I think really people need to understand that this kind of thing happens. And what it is, we had a young man that was at a gas station with his sister and a friend, and while he was pumping gas, his sister and a friend went into the store, and There was a guy in there that started giving him a bunch of guff and started threatening them and stuff. And when they came back out, he followed them out. This young man that was pumping the gas, kind of defended his sister verbally and told this guy to go away and leave him alone. And this guy threatened him. He went to the store to try and get them to call the police, and they locked the doors on him. And he's at the doors, and this guy that was hassling everybody came up behind him and attacked him. He pulled his legal gun that he had registered, was licensed to carry, shot the guy and killed him. Missouri is a stand your ground state. This young man is being charged with second-degree murder. It's just unbelievable. Then, of course, the young man that had the gun is black. The guy that was giving him the trouble was white. And this guy that was giving him all the trouble and was shot and killed has a long record. The young man that had the gun and was protecting himself has no record whatsoever.
Let me ask you this. The NRA is taking up his case, isn't it?
No.
Of course, I was, being facetious.
Do you want to know who's taking up his case?
Who's that?
The Kansas City Freedom Project, Latara Smith. She has been all over the prosecutor and naming her right out in social media and encouraging people to contact her directly and her boss, the prosecutor here in Jackson County, and saying, why are you charging this man? This is a clear case of self-defense. He was attacked and defended himself. He'd been threatened by this guy. That's who's doing this. A small organization that has no funds or anything else, just a voice.
Do you know the young man's name?
Her name is Latara Smith. All right, and she's head of the KC Freedom Project. But the young man that's being charged is Cameron Gines, Gines. You can find information on him and all on the KC Freedom Project Facebook page.
I believe I saw the video that was released of the incident that you're referring to. And from what I saw, if I'm correct, and it's the same case, he was absolutely justified in defending himself with lethal force, particularly in this climate right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
and I remember there was a woman that started it all and pushed it to the edge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The sister.
Well, I don't know what happened in the store. I have not heard much about that. This guy started giving her trouble when she was in the store. This was Mr. Gines' sister.
Uh-huh.
And when she came back out of the store, he followed her and the man that was with her. And her brother, spoke up for her.
I'm probably thinking of a different story or mixing stories up, because there was another one.
This probably is a different story. I have not seen any video of what happened. So I don't know whether anybody took any video or not of this particular incident. But
I do.
The one I'm talking about was similar, but it was a white woman and her boyfriend who were shouting racist epithets at a young black man, and then he ended up.
Oh no.
No, I found the story.
No, this was.
I found the story. Good. Kansas City. Yeah, Kansas City man this was published on the 21st of February. A Kansas City man has been charged in a fatal shooting at a gas station Monday. Cameron, and you spell it with a K, Cameron L. Gines, Gines, 23, he's only 23 years old, is charged with second-degree murder and armed criminal action. Officers were called to 27th in Indiana at around 3 p.m. Monday. They found a man on the ground in the parking lot. He was transported to a nearby hospital where he was declared dead. Police later identified and I hesitate to call him a victim, but the terrorist as Brent Copeland, 37 years old. Witnesses said the victim was involved. Again, they're talking about Brent Copeland, the person who was shot, was involved in an argument with someone in the parking lot. The other person shot the victim and left the scene in a vehicle. Again, this is what they're reporting, doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it went down. It says officials did not provide a description of the suspect or the video or the vehicle. A release from KCPD also notes that this same person that was shot was in a separate altercation with a male in the same parking lot and left before police arrived on the scene. Officials released I'm not even going to read the rest, but definitely this is a story that we need to look more into, reach out to the parties involved in supporting him, and do what we can on our end to publicize his story. Miss Candace Owens, I made a video about her last night, where she's just recently joined the NRA. They billing her as a former reformed Democrat who's now a Republican, and she told a bald-faced lie on Fox and Friends talking about that the NRA was founded as a civil rights organization that armed and trained black folks to protect themselves against the Klan. I mean, how could you even let something so ridiculous come out your mouth? But I'm going to send her his story. I'm going to hit up Colin Noor, who is another black person who is an NRA spokesperson who has millions of followers on his YouTube channel. But those just a couple of people that I will hit off with this story. But of course, we're going to produce our own, media to get the word out. But I appreciate you calling in. Did you have any other thoughts on this? Well, quickly, let me share this.
Well,
you said this happened in Missouri, right? So here we go again. This goes back to what we were talking about the anniversary. I don't know if that's the proper word to say, but the Dred Scott decision, even though that was overturned by the 14th Amendment and enslaved Africans were given citizenship by the 14th Amendment after the Civil War, but prior to the Civil War in the 1857, I believe you said, Max, when the Dred Scott decision came down. And here we have, it's playing out right here. It's playing right out in Missouri. This is a black man, Cameron L. Gaines, although he lawfully had a weapon, a licensed firearm, a license to carry, and you were in a stand your ground state. But hey, what did the judge say in that Dred Scott decision? That there are no rights a black man has that a white man is bound to respect. So they're applying the Dred Scott treatment to Mr. Gaines there in Missouri.
Yep, they are. And the one thing I will say, you mentioned in the article that Mr. Gaines left the scene, and he did, but he went to the office of a local agency, a local neighborhood group, and they talked with him, and he turned himself into the police with no problem at this office. In other words, they called the police and said, hey, here's the guy, come and get him. He's willing to surrender himself. But once again, this prosecutor, and this goes to something that really, really bothers me. When she walked into court with the evidence that she had to make these charges, why would the judge not look at these charges, look at the evidence, and say, you don't have the evidence to make these charges. Go get more evidence. I'm throwing this out. To me, that's judicial misconduct, and we see a heck of a lot of that as well, where judges don't exert their authority to say, you don't have the proper evidence to support the charges that you're charging.
Right.
And that's critical for this whole thing of plea bargaining and pushing people into taking plea bargains.
Right.
Because the judges go along with it.
Second degree, he's charged with second degree murder. Here's a general definition. Let me see. What does second degree? That means that an intentional killing that is not premeditated or planned, nor committed in a reasonable heat of passion. A killing caused by dangerous conduct and offender's obvious lack of concern for human life. I would say, based off of even what's shared in this article, that I agree with you that the charges hold no weight whatsoever. This was clearly self-defense.
It is. And we'll be working, to help this guy the best we can, and really put the information out on this prosecutor that she's doing the wrong thing, and put the pressure on her.
That's all we can do nowadays. As you said, there's groups with no money trying to make things happen, and that's all of us basically. And the reasoning being is that when it comes to those who are wealthy and do have finances of a sort to be able to be to give money to people like yourselves who are trying to fight these things, aren't affected by it. So unless they're into philanthropy, they're not really interested. It's hard to get any money for this. But you can get grants for some music, though. You want to do some music, you can get a grant for that.
There you go.
It's amazing. I don't even want to say thoughts and prayers because, that stuff don't hold no weight nowadays. But let's just say that we are hoping that his story changes for the better. And we'll do what we can to help you.
Yeah, it's okay to say, send your thoughts and prayers, but put some action behind it. Faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
If that's the case, we're talking after the fact then. The works has already been put in.
They can always look up and write to the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office and tell them that they're doing wrong.
Yes.
And you say this information is on the KC Freedom Project? Because I don't
their Facebook page.
Yeah, I don't want to share. I don't want to share any of these articles because they're not giving the details that you gave us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Scotty, we got about 30 minutes left. Do we take a break and go on to the
yes,
last story and final segments?
Yes.
All right. Then that's what we're going to do. Jeff, thank you for sharing information, and we'll continue on with this story. You're listening to New Abolitionist Radio here, where we're talking about modern-day slavery and human trafficking as it is allowed through the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And we'll keep talking about it right after this.
Hi, the Black Talk Media Project would like to invite you to become a member of the BTR Community subscription-based social media platform. BTR Community is a platform that was set up for the listening audience of Black Talk Radio Network, the #1 independent Black radio network online. For just $24 per year, your subscription gives you access to an interactive space to share information with like-minded people with your privacy guaranteed. Your subscription will go a long way to help us maintain and improve our current media platforms. It will also help provide a budget so that we can begin the task of establishing localized media centers and radio stations across the United States. The best way to show your support and appreciation for what we do here at Black Talk Radio is to subscribe. Help us to help you be informed. Join btrcommunity.com today.
Welcome back to New Abolitionist Radio. Time is short, so I'm going to squeeze in some titles for you guys to check out and be aware of.
And Max,
I would love to talk about a few of these.
Hey Max,
Yes.
I found the Facebook page, KC Freedom Project, and I'm sharing one of their posts about Mr. Johns. I'm sharing that to New Abolitionist Radio's Facebook page, and we'll also post it in BTR Community.
Thank you, Scotty. Indeed. Well, as I said, we're limited on time, so I'm going to go through some headlines that you should be aware of. I wish I had the time to talk about a few of these, but I don't. So let's just go with it. First of all, in Florida, there was a teacher that they outed as having a white nationalist podcast. So yes, there was a teacher in Florida who had a white nationalist podcast. Apparently, The school says that they have announced the removal of her, but that is the end of that. Also in South Carolina, the accused teen who wanted to outdo other school shootings I guess there's an article on him talking about the problem with what he was trying to accomplish was he didn't have the right weaponry. Then further, Dylan Roof is sentenced to death for the slaying of the Charleston Nine, including a state senator. So those are some of the things. And finally, I guess the last one is there's a report that just came out that shows that no progress for African Americans on home ownership, unemployment, and incarceration has happened in the last 50 years. So since the March on Washington, we haven't seen no changes. And then the last one, before I get into this one story I want to cover, is there's a video that's available from Vice where a young man interviews an elderly gentleman in Mississippi who did not know that slavery had ended until the 1960s. He and his whole family were enslaved on a plantation in Mississippi all the way up into the 1960s.
Now, that was illegal slavery. That's the distinction. That's why, again, Max, I had to point out the UN Declaration of Human Rights says all forms of slavery. You know, it calls for all forms of slavery to be abolished. So that was no doubtly slavery. It was, but it's already been outlawed by
deception.
You know, right.
Yeah, they had deceived these people. Oh, and there's a Tennessee school that has removed the Confederate flag and murals on the walls that depicted lynchings. The question isn't, is it a good thing that they did? The question is, why in the hell did they ever have it up there in the first place?
Well,
these are the things that are happening to our kids.
Well, how you going to keep racism, white supremacy, and terrorism going if you don't train the kids up in the way that they should go, Max?
And that's what some of these stories I just noted today all show, that it is institutional racism that is as prevalent in our school systems as it is in our justice systems. All right, well, the only story that I'm probably going to be able to cover tonight is something that at first I didn't even think was, something that I wanted to cover, but it became very popular throughout the Facebook community on New Abolitionist Radio, a couple hundred shares on it. And I guess it is very interesting, and there's some backstories to it as well. And that would be corporations are people is built on an incredible 19th century lie. This is pretty long, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read enough so you understand how it came to be the Citizens United decision that made corporations people. And since we've been talking about the 14th Amendment, this is perfect. Somewhat intuitively, American corporations today enjoy many of the same rights as American citizens. Both, for instance, are entitled to the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. How exactly did corporations come to be understood as people bestowed with the most fundamental constitutional rights? The answer can be found in a bizarre, even farcical series of lawsuits over 130 years ago involving a lawyer who lied to the Supreme Court and unethically challenged justice in one of the most powerful corporations of the day. The corporation was the Southern Pacific Railroad Company. Those guys that used convict leasing and kept slavery going. They were owned by the robber baron Leland Stanford. In 1881, after California lawmakers imposed a special tax on railroad property, Southern Pacific pushed back, making the bold argument that the law was an act of unconstitutional discrimination against the 14th Amendment. Adopted after the Civil War to protect the rights of freed slaves, that amendment guaranteed to every person in the equal protection of the laws. Stanford's railroad argued that it was a person too, reasoning that just as the Constitution prohibited discrimination on the basis of racial identity, so did it bar discrimination against Southern Pacific on the basis of its corporate identity. The head lawyer representing Southern Pacific was a man named Roscoe Conkling, a leader of the Republican Party for more than a decade. Conkling had even been nominated to the Supreme Court twice. He begged off both times. The second time after the Senate had confirmed him. He remains the last person to turn down the Supreme Court seat after winning confirmation. More than most lawyers, Conkling was seen by the justices as a peer. It was a trust Conkling would betray as he spoke before the court on Southern Pacific's behalf. Conkling recounted an astonishing tale, In the 1860s, when he was a young congressman, Conklin had served on the drafting committee that was responsible for writing the 14th Amendment. Then the last member of the committee still living, Conklin told the justices that the drafters had changed the wording of the amendment, replacing citizens with persons in order to cover corporations too. Laws referred to persons, he said, have, by long and constant acceptance, been held to embrace artificial persons as well as natural persons. Conklin buttressed his account with a surprising piece of evidence, a musty old journal that he claimed was a previously unpublished record of the deliberations of the drafting committee during the 14th Amendment. Years later, historians would discover that Conklin's journal was real, but his story was a fraud. The journal was in fact a record of the Congressional Committee's deliberations, but upon close examination, it offered no evidence that the drafters intended to protect corporations. It showed, in fact, that the language of the Equal Protection Clause was never changed from citizen to person. So far as anyone can tell, the rights of corporations were not raised in the public debates over the ratification of the 14th Amendment or in any way the state's ratifying conventions. And prior to Conklin's appearance on behalf of Southern Pacific, no member of the drafting committee had ever suggested that corporations were covered. There's reason to suspect Conklin's deception was uncovered back in his time, too. The justices held on to the case for 3 years without ever issuing a decision until Southern Pacific unexpectedly settled the case. Then shortly after, another case from Southern Pacific reached the Supreme Court raising the exact same legal question. The company had the same team of lawyers with the exception of Conklin. Tellingly, Southern Pacific's lawyers omitted any mention of Conklin's drafting history or his journal. Had those lawyers believed Conklin, it would have been malpractice to leave out his story. You can read the rest of that on New Abolitionist Radio, but basically it shows that corporations went and stole the rights that were meant for African Americans, took it upon themselves, and then overruled the rights of those very same people who were supposed to be protected.
What a great country we live in, Max.
So a pretty amazing story of how this one man got up there and lied, Roscoe Conklin, to the Supreme Court about what he saw and did, and it changed everything after that. That's why corporations are the way they are right now.
Yeah, and you know Mitt Romney's famous phrase, corporations are people too. So maybe he's been doing some studying.
Speaking of those evil beings called corporations, I want to remind everybody about something that I feel is as important as the NCAA circumstance, and that is the ACLU story that has come out, the report about the criminalization of private debt and how private corporations are working directly with the Department of Justice and judges and prosecutors in order to issue warrants for debts and fees from private companies. I think that is just that's a constitutional crisis all by itself. And people should be up in arms about that. I mean, you may not care now, but let them show up for that library book you never gave back 20 years ago and find out that you owe $16,000 or $18,000. And don't think it won't happen because we reported that very same story right here from New Abolitionist Radio. They will do it. Here's one that most people of color can understand. Wait till they start arresting you for not paying hospital bills.
Wow, man. I thought Obamacare was supposed to have solved all those problems, but I guess not. But Max, we are running out of time, bro. We got, 3 segments?
Yes. Well, they're pretty relatively short segments, so if you want to pick one that you can start with tonight, we have our abolitionist in profile, which is Harriet Tubman. We have our rider of the 21st Century Underground Railroad, and also our segment for freedom's sake, a history of rebellion. And I provided some text for the latter of those.
Okay, you say it's Harriet Tubman. I thought I had saw something else, another person. Oh, okay, here it is. It was her. Let's go ahead and cue up this video biography if it's not too long.
Hey, it's 4 minutes.
Okay, let me go ahead and cue that up. And we'll go ahead and give it a quick listen for our abolitionists in profile. It says Araminta Minty Ross, better known as the one and only Harriet Tubman, born 1820, Dorchester County, Maryland, and joined the ancestors on March the 10th, 1913 in Auburn, New York. So let's give a listen to our quick bio.
The Underground Railroad was a secret network of routes and safe houses that helped people escape slavery to settle in Canada as well as in some free northern states. Some believe that secret messages in the form of quilt patterns helped enslaved African men and women escape the bonds of captivity in the southern states. Likewise, it is believed that singing gospel songs was a means to communicate among slaves who traveled the Underground Railroad. The lyrics provided verbal, coded communication that uncovered hidden messages and warnings about their travels.
Wade in the water, children, wade.
The bold, selfless acts of one determined individual contributed to the freedom of many. Harriet Tubman, the Black Moses, as she was often called, is well known for leading many enslaved people to freedom in Canada by following the North Star. She made countless journeys and never once lost a passenger. Tubman, a runaway slave from Maryland, was determined to abolish the misery and suffering of her people.
Before achieving fame as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, Tubman was an enslaved African woman. She felt like she almost was actually free as she toiled with little supervision while felling trees and cutting up lumber in Maryland. Once, while in the fields, she saw someone trying to escape and got involved. She was injured and in turn became more steadfast in her wish to be free. Tubman was the youngest of her family and worked with them in the fields. When she married and discovered her husband was not willing to head north with her, she set out alone.
She then ventured to Philadelphia, where she associated with abolitionists and learned about the connections of the Underground Railroad. When the far-reaching United States Fugitive Law was passed in 1850, Harriet Tubman guided fugitive enslaved African men and women into Canada. Angry slave owners posted rewards for her capture, but she continued her work despite great personal risk. Tough and courageous, in spite of her petite frame, she always carried a weapon intimidating those who supported slavery and discouraging enslaved people from backing out of the strenuous journey. She threatened anyone who considered turning back, knowing the danger of those involved, revealing the routes and safe house locations.
As the conductor, Tubman had the problem of keeping people motivated and together as they traveled by night and hid by day. Because Tubman was so successful at organizing these group escapes, slave owners offered high rewards for her capture. She is thought to have led as many as 19 rescue missions. While the possibility of torture or death or being resold into the Deep South always existed, it was the loss of family members that Tubman feared most. She made a point of rescuing all of her family, settling them in both Ontario and later New York State. She gave her life to making people free.
St. Catharines, Ontario was one of the towns in which Harriet passed through on her journeys. The town offered employment opportunities to the escaped enslaved people. Many of the former fugitives settled there, including her own parents, brothers, sisters, and their families. Harriet Tubman lived in St. Catharines from 1851 to 1857. Harriet's role in the Underground Railroad movement was one of the many inspiring accomplishments of her life. She was an activist in the abolitionist movement, worked as a nurse in the Civil War, and served as a spy for the Union forces in South Carolina.
The need for the Underground Railroad ended after the American Civil War. Tubman had been actively involved with the Northern forces as a nurse, spy, and cook. She supported suffrage and founded a home for the homeless before she passed away in 1913 at the age of 93.
God's gonna trouble the water.
All right, and New Abolitionist
here at New Abolitionist Radio, we salute you, Harriet Tubman.
Most certainly, man. I tell you, a very inspiring woman. One of the things they left out And that was actually produced by Canada, I guess one of their immigration divisions, where they're highlighting, history in Canada, which, they said there she settled her own parents there in that little town in Canada. So I want to thank them for sharing that information. But, what was left out was that she actually led a battalion of Union troops to raid a plantation where I believe it was something like 700 individuals freed. But she was more than a Union spy. She was she was a soldier in more ways than one. Max.
Well, I could talk all day about Harriet Tubman. It's not the first time we've had her as an abolitionist in profile, and I am a fan of Harriet Tubman, and I understand a lot of things about her. Like the thing that vexed her the most was the idea that she couldn't even convince people who were in chains that they were slaves. She's like, I could have freed 1,000 more if I could have just convinced them that they were still slaves. And then secondly, and I'll finish with that, is one of the most shameful days that I'll ever see in the United States of America is the day they issue a $20 bill with Harriet Tubman's face on it. I just can't imagine any more of a disgrace and a disrespect to her and what she was about than doing that.
Right. I agree.
All right. Well, our next segment is For Freedom's Sake, a history of rebellion. And tonight we want to remember Yanga Veracruz. You'll see a statue of a tall, imposing African with a machete in hand. He's known throughout Mexico as the first liberator of the Americas, but the locals call him El Yango. His real name is Gaspar Yanga, and he was the leader of one of the greatest slave rebellions in North America. Legend has it that Yanga was born in 1545, and he was actually West African royalty before he was captured and brought to Mexico. In Mexico, he was put to work in the blistering heat of a Veracruz plantation, but he wasn't content to spend his days hacking sugarcane. Instead, he rallied his fellow slaves and led them on a great escape into the mountains near Cordoba. There, Yanga and his band of black and Indian runaways formed a community dedicated to keeping slaves in the Spanish out. They plundered caravans traveling to Mexico City, taking goods and weapons. And when they got lonely, they raided nearby towns, capturing local women. Yanga and his band of Cimarrones lived in the mountains for 40 years before the Spanish got sick of him. In 1609, they sent 550 troops, all heavily armed, into the mountains to capture those pesky slaves. But Yanga and his men were waiting for them, armed mostly with rocks, machetes, and bows. First, Yanga tried to be diplomatic and make a deal, but when the Spanish burned his village to the ground, the runaways took to the jungle. The Spanish made the mistake of following them into the forest and were assaulted left and right by stones and arrows. Eventually, the Spanish grew tired of the guerrilla warfare and agreed to negotiate. In exchange for their loyalty and an annual tribute, Yanga and his community were granted freedom and the rights to form their own settlement. In 1618, the rebels formed the town of San Lorenzo de los Negros, and today it is known simply as Yanga. And we here at New Abolitionist Radio remember you and your rebellion, Yanga. Salute.
All right, we got one more segment, as we do got another program coming up. So we have
one more segment.
Okay.
Would you like to do it, or you want me to run through it real quick?
If you run through it real quick, because I'm having trouble finding it.
Okay, this one comes from the Innocence Project. Shout out to Johanna Elia, who was involved in the Innocence Project fundraiser, where he's running, I guess it's in a marathon to help raise funds for it. So today, a Connecticut man exonerated after serving 16 years for a 1991 murder he didn't commit. Bite mark analysis, who proved critical testimony, now acknowledge his testimony was not based on science. It marks the 30th wrongful conviction for indictment based on flawed bite mark analyses. Hartford, Connecticut, March 1st, 2018. With the consent of Hartford State Attorney Gail Hardy, a Connecticut judge dismissed the 1991 murder indictment against Alfred Swinton today, based on new DNA and other evidence proving his innocence. DNA testing excluded Swinton as the source of male DNA collected from underneath the victim's fingernails. the rape kit, and swabs taken from a bite mark on the victim. Additionally, the bite mark analyst, Dr. Gus Karazoulas, now acknowledges that his testimony connecting Swinton to the crime was not based on science. Swinton is the 30th person to have been wrongfully convicted or indicted based at least in part on bite mark analysis. Yet courts continue to allow prosecutors to rely on the widely discredited evidence. Swinton, whose 2001 conviction was vacated back in June 2017, wrongfully served 16 years. We are grateful to State Attorney Hardy for recognizing the powerful evidence of Mr. Swinton's innocence and moving to right the injustice caused to him, said Maura Barry Grinalds of Scaldin Arps, which assisted on the case. And we here at New Abolitionist Radio would like to say, welcome to freedom, Brother Swinton.
Welcome to freedom.
Indeed, man. Whew. These segments, wow, they just drive it home every week about why we're here, because of those things. Well, Scotty, we're at the end of our program, and as you said, you got another program coming up behind us. So any final comments for the evening?
I just want to thank our guests, Jocelyn and Diana of IWOC, and just very appreciative of the work that they do. I mean, they really do put in some good work, and not under a nonprofit or anything like that. They're truly a grassroots movement, and I just really appreciate what they're doing and taking the time out to share the information with us tonight. Slavery is not going to end itself. It's going to take boots on the ground. So put your boots on and let's hit the ground.
Word. Yes, like you, Scotty, thank you to our guests and our caller. I want to give a shout out to Sister Hannah X that you can call anytime, and we'll talk about the Ohio case that you want to speak on. So if you're listening, just call up next week and we'll go over it. Here's my final comments for the evening. It's a quote from Genesis 27:40. And by the sword thou shalt live, and thou shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that you shall break his yoke from off your neck. That's plan A. Remember, abolition is a reason for a revolution, so we can finally know some peace. See you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Peace, guys.
Rise up, 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 rise up. Showtime. Just lift your eyes up. Let your wise rise up. See the signs of the times. If it's time, rise up, rise up. When death and hell dwell among all God's people. When those we chose and trusted have become completely corrupted and inherently evil. When the feast that feeds you starves our father's children. When snuff, porn, and pedo forms begin to get top billing, rise up. When famine claims millions. When justice gives blind eyes to billions. When the Lord's anger is no longer feared. If his protection is gone and your enemies are near. If you've seen the seas spill over and the mountains shake, break, and fall. If the moon ever turns blood red and you can't see the sun at all.